could be out of it, and we could look at the fact that the face of the league, Caitlin Clark, no doubt about it, every measure possible, has got a fist to her throat. Caitlin Clark, who has brought the charter flights, I broke that.
She has made Alyssa Thomas's life better. She's making more money. She's not in the middle seat anymore in coach. And instead, you've got the fist to the throat. She's hitting the person who brought her all of that. That was sports journalist Christine Brennan speaking with Dan Dockey, and I want you to hold on to every single word of that, because that right there is the entire story. That is the thesis. That is the receipts. That is the indictment, all wrapped up in about 15 seconds of the most clarifying television anyone has produced about this league in years. This is the story of Caitlin Clark, the single most valuable asset women's professional basketball has ever produced, being physically attacked on the court, having the incident initially waved off as a no call, watching the head coach of another team use a press conference to redirect the blame toward fans, rather than toward the player who put a fist into the throat of the golden goose. And then, and this is the part that should make every single person watching this video genuinely furious, watching the commissioner of the league say absolutely nothing publicly about whether she was concerned for Caitlin Clark's safety. Nothing publicly from the commissioner about the safety of the face of the league. I want you to sit with that, and by the time we get to the 12-minute mark of this video, you are going to understand exactly who benefits from the chaos, who is being protected, and why Caitlin Clark's silence this week is the loudest, most devastating response she could have possibly given. Let's get into it.
Before we start with questions, I just want to address, what's going on with AT. I think first and foremost, it's absolutely unacceptable. I think as a league, as a whole, there's been so much more toxicity, racism, homophobia, straight out nonsense, hate nonsense. And it is absolutely unacceptable. Most of this coming from the online community. Most of this, in my heart of hearts, I believe, not coming from WNBA fans. With players and teams, that is going to come. But it's not hard to not be a jerk.
Here is what actually happened, stripped of all the noise, laid out in plain business terms, because that is exactly what this is, a business story. Last Wednesday night, the Phoenix Mercury played the Indiana Fever. During a scramble for a loose ball, Alyssa Thomas, a six-time All-Star, a veteran of this league, appeared to drive her fist directly into Caitlin Clark's throat. Not a brush, not an incidental elbow, a fist to the throat of the face of the league. The referees on the floor called nothing. Zero. A no call in real time on what the league itself, after a post-game review, upgraded to a flagrant 2 and a 1-game suspension. Let me repeat that, because that is our payoff stat and I need you to lock it in. The league's own post-game review upgraded the call from a no call to a flagrant 2. That is the league admitting, in writing, that what happened on that court was serious enough to warrant their highest foul designation and a suspension. The refs missed it, the league caught it later, and somehow in the days that followed, the conversation shifted entirely away from that flagrant 2 and onto the fans in the stands. That is not an accident. That is not how these things just organically unfold. That is a choice. And by a choice, I mean a catastrophic institutional failure. Now, Alyssa Thomas says it was a complete accident. That is her position. I am not here to put words in her mouth, and I am not here to assign malice where I cannot prove it. What I am here to do is talk about what happened after, because the after is where this story gets genuinely infuriating. Stephanie White, the Indiana Fever head coach, held a press conference. And what Stephanie White chose to do with that press conference is what broke the internet this week. Instead of a straightforward acknowledgement that her player was on the receiving end of a flagrant 2 foul, Stephanie White used that platform to address the toxicity and hate directed at Alyssa Thomas online. Which, let me be completely clear, is a legitimate concern. Death threats are real, racial slurs are real. No human being, athlete or otherwise, deserves that. Full stop. But here is the problem. Here is the part that every single person watching this video felt in their gut when they saw that press conference. Stephanie White did not once acknowledge that Caitlin Clark was the one who had a fist driven into her throat. She did not once say, by the way, what happened to Caitlin Clark on that court was also wrong. The entire framing of that press conference was, protect our players, protect Alyssa Thomas, this toxicity is unacceptable. And the woman who got the flagrant 2 called on her was presented as the victim of the situation. That is what's fascinating, and by fascinating I mean absolutely infuriating, about how this league operates. The asset gets fouled, the asset says nothing, the asset's coach says nothing publicly, and the coach of the team that fouled the asset holds a press conference to talk about protecting her own player from the consequences of the foul. That is the sequence of events. That is what we are working with here. Now, if you are finding this breakdown valuable, if you appreciate someone actually laying out the receipts instead of just yelling, please subscribe to Rim Run right now and hit the notification bell. We do this work every single time a story like this breaks, and you do not want to be the last one to find out when the next one drops.
All about the visual that will live with this league, I believe, forever. I think that picture, the fist to the throat, is that big of a deal, Dan. I wish it wasn't racial. I wish it was more Mabry or somebody,
Let me give you the analogy that crystallizes exactly what is happening here, because I think sometimes you need to step outside the sport to see it clearly. Imagine you own a restaurant. For years, the restaurant is doing okay, not great, not terrible, just surviving. Then one day you hire a chef, and this chef is extraordinary. This chef is the reason people drive 45 minutes out of their way to eat at your restaurant. This chef is the reason your reservation list is booked out 3 weeks. This chef is the reason you can finally afford to upgrade from folding chairs to actual furniture. This chef is the reason your entire staff got a raise. Now imagine that one of the other cooks in the kitchen elbows that chef in the throat during a busy service. The floor manager sees it and calls it nothing. The owner reviews the tape later and says, okay, yeah, that was a flagrant elbow, 1-day suspension for the cook. And then, and this is the part where the analogy becomes almost too on the nose, the manager of the section where the cook works holds a staff meeting to talk about how mean the Yelp reviewers have been to the cook who threw the elbow. No one in that meeting says, by the way, our star chef got elbowed in the throat and we should probably make sure she is okay and make clear that will never happen again. That is this situation. That is this league right now. And the owner, and by the owner I mean Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, has said nothing publicly about the safety and well-being of the chef, who is the only reason the restaurant has customers. I want you to sit with that for a second, because Christine Brennan said it on the record and she said it plainly. She said she wished she would hear from Cathy Engelbert about whether the commissioner was concerned about Caitlin Clark being injured. She said she had not heard that, not publicly, from the commissioner of the league, about the safety of the face of the league. That is not hyperbole. That is not me hyping this up for clicks. That is a journalist who covers this sport for a living, saying on the record that the commissioner of the WNBA has not publicly expressed concern for Caitlin Clark's physical safety after a flagrant 2 foul to the throat. Now let's talk about the pattern, because this is not an isolated incident. This is a recurring feature of how this league handles Caitlin Clark. And the pattern is this. Caitlin Clark gets hit. Caitlin Clark says nothing. Caitlin Clark goes back to work. And the conversation somehow always ends up being about everyone except Caitlin Clark.
Could be out of it, and we could look at the fact that the face of the league, Caitlin Clark, no doubt about it, every measure possible, has got a fist to her throat. Caitlin Clark, who has brought the charter flights, I broke that.
You just heard Stephanie White at that press conference. It's absolutely unacceptable. There's been so much more toxicity, racism, homophobia. And look, she is not wrong about any of that in isolation. Toxicity is real, racism is real, homophobia is real. Those things are unacceptable. The WNBA should address all of that. But what is fascinating, and by fascinating I mean genuinely revealing about the priorities of this league, is what was conspicuously absent from that entire statement. Stephanie White stood at that podium and delivered a full-throated defense of the environment around her player. She talked about inclusiveness, she talked about elevating, she talked about what the league is about. She did not say, and also, what happened to Caitlin Clark on that court was wrong, and I want to be clear that my player's 1-game suspension was warranted. She did not say that, and the absence of that statement is louder than anything she did say. Now here is where the business argument becomes impossible to ignore, and I need every single person watching this to follow this logic all the way through, because this is where the story stops being about basketball and starts being about institutional self-destruction. Caitlin Clark is the economic engine of this league right now. That is not an opinion, that is the math. TV ratings, attendance figures, charter flights. As Christine Brennan pointed out, she broke the story that Caitlin Clark's arrival is what got these players out of the middle seat in coach. That is a direct, traceable, documented improvement in the quality of life of every single player in this league, including Alyssa Thomas. The league's own post-game review gave us a flagrant 2, the highest foul designation in the rulebook, confirming that the asset, the money, the one draw that is keeping this league in the national conversation, had a fist driven into her throat and the refs missed it entirely. And the response from league leadership? a statement condemning hate, a statement about the safety and well-being of everyone in the community, a statement about being in contact with the Phoenix Mercury organization. No statement about Caitlin Clark. No public expression of concern from Cathy Engelbert about the physical safety of the player who is single-handedly responsible for the new eyeballs that Good Morning America is talking about. No statement that said, "We are also committed to protecting the face of this league from flagrant fouls on the basketball court." That is the worst of both worlds. And by worst of both worlds, I mean a strategy so counterproductive, it would be impressive if it were not so damaging. You alienate the new fan base by appearing to minimize what happened to the player they came to watch. You do not actually solve the online toxicity problem because a press conference has never once stopped anyone on the internet from being terrible. And you leave your most valuable asset, the commodity, the golden goose, without a single public word of support from the top of the organization. That is not leadership. That is a house of cards.
Before we start with questions, I just want to address, what's going on with AT. I think first and foremost, it's absolutely unacceptable. I think as a league, as a whole, there's been so much more toxicity, racism, homophobia, straight out like nonsense, hate nonsense. And it is absolutely unacceptable. Most of this coming from the online community. Most of this, in my heart of hearts, I believe, not coming from WNBA fans, with players and teams, that is going to come. But it's not hard to not be a jerk.
The face of the league, Caitlin Clark, no doubt about it, every measure possible, has got a fist to her throat. Caitlin Clark, who brought the charter flights, with all the TV ratings, all the attendance figures, everything that she has brought. She has made Alyssa Thomas's life better. That is Christine Brennan, a journalist, on the record, saying what the commissioner of the WNBA has apparently not been able to bring herself to say publicly. And I want you to notice the specific framing Christine Brennan used. She said every measure possible. Every measure possible. That is not a casual throwaway line. That is a journalist who covers sports for a living telling you that by any metric you choose to apply, Caitlin Clark is the face of this league, and the face of this league got a fist to the throat, and the commissioner said nothing about it publicly. Now let's talk about Caitlin Clark's response. Because the title of this video promises you a response, and I am going to deliver on that promise. But the response is not what most people expected, and honestly, it is more devastating than anything she could have said into a microphone. Caitlin Clark said nothing. Zero media, no press run, no statement, no social media posts, nothing. And by nothing, I mean everything. Think about what that silence communicates. This is a woman who has been media trained to an extraordinary degree. You saw the clip. A reporter asks her about a leg sleeve, and she turns it into a moment of warmth and humor without giving anyone a single negative headline. She plays with the media, she controls the narrative. She knows exactly what she is doing at a podium. So when Caitlin Clark, who knows exactly how to talk to reporters, who could have generated massive sympathetic headlines with a single sentence about what happened to her on that court, chooses instead to show up at a soccer game and go about her life, that is not an accident. That is a choice, that is a statement, that is Caitlin Clark communicating, through her actions, that she is so far above this chaos that she does not even need to acknowledge it. While the league was busy managing the fallout, while Stephanie White was holding press conferences, while Cathy Engelbert's office was releasing statements about community safety, Caitlin Clark was watching soccer. She was living her life. She was demonstrating, in the most visible way possible, that she is unbothered. And that unbothered energy is more powerful than any press conference, because it tells everyone watching, the fans, the sponsors, the TV networks, the new eyeballs that Good Morning America is talking about, that the asset is fine, the asset is above this, and the asset does not need the league to protect her because she is built different. That is the contrast that is going to haunt this league. The woman who got the flagrant 2 called on her is the one who kept her composure. The woman who got a fist to the throat is the one who did not make herself the victim. The woman who built the charter flights and the TV ratings and the attendance numbers is the one who showed up to a soccer game and smiled while everyone else was in crisis mode. I want you to sit with that contrast, because it tells you everything you need to know about the maturity gap between Caitlin Clark and the people who are supposed to be leading this league. And here is the thing that nobody wants to say out loud, but that every single person watching this already knows. When Caitlin Clark got death threats, and she did because a fan stated they were ready to inflict harm and violence against her, Caitlin Clark said nothing. She did not hold a press conference. She did not blast the commissioner. She did not demand that the league do more. She played basketball. She talked to the media about the game. She never once portrayed herself as the victim. That is the standard. That is what professionalism at the highest level looks like. And the fact that we are now in a situation where the league is rallying around the player who received a one-game suspension for a flagrant 2 foul, while the player who received the flagrant 2 foul is silently going about her business, tells you everything about the institutional priorities of this league. The payoff stat, the one number I need you to carry out of this video, is this: flagrant 2. That is the highest foul designation in the rulebook. The league's own review confirmed it, and the commissioner of the league said nothing publicly about the safety of the player on the receiving end of it. That is the number, that is the designation, that is the indictment. A flagrant 2, the most serious foul classification the league has, and the commissioner stayed silent about the victim.
All about the visual that will live with this league, I believe, forever. I think that picture, the fist to the throat, is that big of a deal, Dan. I wish it wasn't racial. I wish it was more Mabry or somebody,
So here is where we land. Here is the verdict, and here are the predictions. Verdict: Cathy Engelbert and the WNBA's league office have failed Caitlin Clark in the most public and most counterproductive way imaginable. They had a simple job this week. A simple, obvious, brand-protecting job. Say publicly, we are concerned about Caitlin Clark's safety. Say publicly, the flagrant 2 was warranted, and we take the physical protection of every player seriously, starting with the face of our league. That is it. That is the entire job. 2 sentences. And they could not do it. Instead, the conversation became about protecting the player who received the suspension and the player who received the flagrant 2 foul. The asset, the commodity, the one draw, was left to defend herself through the loudest possible silence. Prediction 1. This gets worse before it gets better. The 2 teams play again. The rematch is coming, and the entire sports media apparatus is going to be watching every single interaction between these players with a microscope. Every foul, every scramble, every post-whistle exchange is going to be dissected. And if the league has not clearly and publicly established that Caitlin Clark's physical safety is a priority, the next incident, whatever it is, however minor, is going to explode 10 times bigger than this one. Prediction 2. Caitlin Clark is going to keep doing exactly what she is doing. She is going to play basketball. She is going to give charming, professional, media-trained press conference answers. She is going to not make herself the victim, and every time she does that, the contrast with everyone else involved in this situation is going to become more and more stark. The asset does not need the league. The league needs the asset, and the asset knows it. Prediction 3. Cathy Engelbert is going to face increasing pressure from journalists, from fans, and from the media to say something, anything, publicly about Caitlin Clark's safety and well-being. Christine Brennan has already said it on the record. Good Morning America is covering this story. The pressure is building, and by the time the rematch happens, the silence from the commissioner's office is going to be completely untenable. And that brings us back to the flagrant 2, the highest foul designation in the rulebook. Confirmed by the league's own review, called on the face of the league, and the commissioner said nothing publicly about it. That is the story, that is the whole story, and that is not hyperbole. That is simply the math. Here is what I need from you right now. Drop your honest take in the comments. Forced choice, yes or no. Is the WNBA deliberately failing Caitlin Clark? Or is this just incompetent leadership that does not know how to protect its most valuable asset? Yes or no. Deliberately failing her, or just incompetent? Drop it below right now. I want to see where this community lands, and I will be reading every single response. If you are not subscribed to RimRun yet, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on all notifications, not just the bell, all notifications, so you do not miss the next breakdown when this story develops. Because it is going to develop, the rematch is coming. The commissioner's silence is going to break one way or another. And when it does, we are going to be here with the full breakdown before anyone else. And click the video on your screen right now. We have got another deep dive that connects directly to everything we just talked about, and you do not want to leave without watching it. This is RimRun. We'll see you in the next one.